Grok was asked who built the pyramids. 500,000 people watched it go viral. It took the pyramids apart in 7 claims, and it sounded airtight. The unsettling part is that some of what it said is actually true. The base really is flat to 2 centimeters across 2 football fields. The angles, the ratios, the numbers, they're all real. Grok's story about them isn't. By the end, you'll know exactly where Grok's story breaks. Grok starts where any honest investigator would. The floor. That opening fact is completely real. The base of the Great Pyramid, spread across more than 13 acres, is level to within about 2 centimeters. Across a footprint you could lay several football fields on. That's not a myth. Flinders Petrie measured it back in the 1880s. It's one of the most precise large surfaces the ancient world ever produced. Then Grok makes its move. It takes that real number and quietly swaps one word. Precise becomes impossible. Builders hit a tolerance tighter than modern crews bother with, using only copper and water and wood. So the textbook must be hiding something. Watch what it skips. Though, the Egyptians didn't stack millions of blocks to that tolerance. They cleared the ground to bedrock and left a knoll of solid rock standing in the center. Much of that perfect floor was never loose stone at all. It was the mountain itself. To level the rest, they used the one tool that never lies: water. They cut shallow trenches, flooded them, marked the waterline, and chipped away everything above it. If you've ever leveled a deck with a clear hose full of water, you already know the trick. It sits dead flat at both ends, however far apart you pull them. And a disciplined crew, the Giza Plateau, and a few patient years. And you don't get magic. You get exactly this. The floor isn't unexplained. It's brilliant. And it's understood. One point to reality. Nothing to Grok. A floor. You can pour. Though. The next claim. You can't. Because it isn't about how flat the pyramid sits. It's about which way the whole mountain faces. Second fact. Same pattern. It's true. The 4 sides lock onto true north to within 3 to 4 arc minutes. About a 20th of a degree. Roughly the width of a coin held at arm's length. Petrie measured that one too. Grok's instinct isn't wrong at first. True north is genuinely hard to find. Magnetic north drifts and sits in the wrong place. And back then no bright star sat directly on the pole. To aim a building this precisely, you have to read the sky. Grok's right about that much. Then comes the leap. Accuracy like this needs a modern surveyor's transit. So the builders must have known things we've lost. But we didn't lose it. We tested it. Researchers have field-tested at least 3 sky-based methods the Egyptians could plausibly have used: lining up 2 circling stars with a plumb line, or reading a rod's shadow at the equinox. Those simple tricks land within a few arc minutes of true north. The sky was the instrument, not some lost technology. Grok never mentions the detail that quietly ends the argument. Later pyramids are aimed worse. The alignment drifts, generation by generation. A lost super tool wouldn't get sloppier over time. A method that leans on slowly moving stars would. That's the fingerprint of human hands, caught mid-motion. Not a machine that forgot how it worked. Worth sitting with, why that drift matters so much. If the Egyptians genuinely possessed some vanished precision instrument, you'd expect every generation after Khufu to use it too. And the alignment should stay locked at 3 or 4 arc minutes indefinitely. Instead, the drift grows steadily worse across later dynasties. That's exactly the pattern you'd expect from astronomers slowly losing access to the specific stars they'd been using as circumpolar pairs. As those stars' positions shifted over centuries, a lost technology doesn't degrade on a predictable astronomical schedule. A technique tied to the sky does, because the sky itself keeps moving. 2 claims down, 2 points to reality. Grok keeps marveling at the right things and misreading every one of them. Direction is simple next to this, though. Grok's next move walks straight into pure math. A perfect circle hidden inside a building made of nothing but straight lines. Third claim, and this is the one Grok clearly loves most. Divide the pyramid's perimeter by its height, and you land on a number almost exactly twice pi, accurate to a 20th of 1%, baked into a building 4,500 years before anyone wrote the symbol down. Grok's framing? You can't stumble into pi by accident. The builders must have understood a constant we didn't formally rediscover until Archimedes, over 2,000 years later, except you can stumble into it easily. Egyptian architects designed pyramids by slope, using a simple rise-over-run ratio called a cited, set with nothing fancier than a plumb line and a square. Khufu's pyramid runs on a ratio of 11:7. Grok skips this part. 11/7, doubled, happens to be one of the best simple fractions for pi that exists. Any pyramid built on that everyday ratio spits out 2 pi in its perimeter, whether the builders ever heard of pi or not. You don't need to know the freezing point of water to build a house that survives winter. You just need a ratio that works. And it happens to line up with a number you never had to name. 3 claims down, 3 points to reality. The math is real. The mind reading isn't. Pi isn't even the coincidence Grok is proudest of, though. The next one, it says, is even tighter. A ratio so exact it can only be the golden ratio itself, hiding in stone. Fourth claim, delivered like a second miracle. Take the slant height running up one face, divided by half the base width, and you land on 1.618 phi. Bohr. The golden ratio, showing up in a tomb from 4,500 years ago. Grok's framing? Pi was already impossible. Now phi, too? That's not one coincidence anymore. That's a pattern. And a pattern means intention. It isn't a second coincidence. It's the same one, wearing a different face. Height, half base, and slant height form a simple right triangle. Basic Pythagoras. 4 divided by pi and the square root of phi land within 0.1% of each other. Once a shape locks in that pi ratio from claim 3, the geometry has no choice left. Phi comes along for free. Picture stretching a rubber band around a box. Pull it tight one way, and a second, unrelated-looking measurement snaps into place too. Not because you planned 2 things, but because you only ever controlled one. 4 claims down. 4 points to reality. Pi and phi aren't 2 locks the builder's pit. They're one lock, described twice. This is where Grok stops playing with ratios on paper and starts claiming the pyramid knows the actual size of the planet it's standing on. 5th claim. And this is the one that gets the slow-motion drone shot in every video that repeats it. Multiply the pyramid's height by 43,200, and you get the polar radius of Earth. Multiply its perimeter by that same number, and you get Earth's equatorial circumference, an actual scale model of the planet, supposedly built long before anyone could measure it from space. It sounds airtight, because it's stacked directly on top of Claim 3. That's exactly the problem with it. Earth is close enough to a sphere that its own circumference divided by its own radius lands close to 2 pi, the same ratio the pyramid already carries. So of course you can find some multiplier that lines it up with the planet. The number 43,200 isn't hiding inside the stone. It's solved for backward, then wrapped in a precession cycle that's a modern astronomical framework, not an ancient measurement anyone actually took. Run the real precise numbers instead of the rounded ones. And the fit gets worse, not better. The implied radius misses Earth's actual value by 25 kilometers. It's confirmation bias doing the work, not a hidden blueprint. 5 claims down. 5 points to reality. This wasn't new evidence. It was the pi coincidence from Claim 3, wearing a globe for a costume. Grok isn't done stacking either. Next it goes after the one number that should be hardest to fake, the angle of the slope itself. 6 claim, aimed at the number that feels hardest to fake. The face of the Great Pyramid rises at 51.84 degrees, not a round number, not something you'd hit by eye. Grok calls it too specific to be anything but deliberate, high-precision engineering. Evidence of tools that shouldn't have existed yet. Here's the reveal this whole video has been quietly building toward. That angle isn't a fourth miracle. It's the first one, measured with a protractor instead of a tape. Egyptian builders set a slope with the second, that same simple rise-over-run ratio, laid out with chords, and a level. The Great Pyramid was built to a sect of 14:11. Run that ratio through an inverse tangent, and out comes 51.84 degrees, forced by the exact same number that already gave us pi in Claim 3 and phi in Claim 4. Sugar, flour, and butter aren't three separate decisions if they all come pre-measured in a single mix. You picked the mix once. Everything downstream just followed from that one choice. 6 claims down. 6 points to reality. Grok didn't find 4 separate miracles in this pyramid. It found one sect ratio, and counted it 4 times, in 4 different units. The final claim doesn't come from the pyramid at all, though, and it isn't a ratio anyone can double-check with a calculator. It comes from the Sphinx, and from the weather itself. Grok saves its eeriest claim for last. The deep grooves down the Sphinx's body and its enclosure walls, it says, are the work of heavy rain, and it hasn't rained like that at Giza since long before the pharaohs. So the Sphinx must be thousands of years older than we're told, carved by a civilization lost to history entirely. This one deserves real respect, unlike the number tricks before it. There's an actual scientist behind it. Geologist Robert Schoch did argue the weathering looks rain-cut, and the debate among geologists over it is genuine. Take it seriously. Then look at what Grok leaves out of it. Rain isn't the only thing that carves soft limestone into vertical grooves. Groundwater soaks into the porous rock, dries, and crystallizes as salt in the pores, flaking the surface off in sheets, helped along by wind and by centuries spent buried in damp sand. Mainstream geologists read that as a slower, later process that needs no lost age at all to explain it. That salt weathering process has a name, holoclasty, and it's well documented on soft limestone monuments across the entire region, not just at Giza. The same vertical grooving shows up on structures whose age nobody disputes, built centuries after the Sphinx using ordinary Old Kingdom tools and techniques. If the pattern appears just as strongly on monuments with a known, undisputed age, that's a strong sign the weathering explains itself through ordinary geology. It doesn't need to borrow 10,000 years from a civilization that left no other trace of ever existing. Second, the part Grok skips entirely. The Sphinx doesn't stand alone. The temple in front of it was built from the very blocks quarried out of the pit around it. The pit and the temple were carved together, in Khafre's reign. The causeway, the layout, the face carved in Old Kingdom style, every thread ties it to the same 4,500-year-old complex around it. Here's the weight the claim actually has to carry. To make the Sphinx that old, you need an advanced civilization thousands of years before the pharaohs, one that carved a mountain into a lion and then vanished without a trace. It left no tools, no pottery, no houses, no writing, nothing but scratches on one statue. Even Schoch himself never said Atlantis. Grok reached straight past the careful scientist and grabbed the wildest version off the shelf instead. Compare what each side actually has to explain. The mainstream case needs ordinary weathering on soft stone over 4,500 years, a process you can watch happen on other monuments today. The lost civilization case needs an entire advanced society, with agriculture, tools, and organized labor sophisticated enough to carve a monument this size. That then disappeared so completely it left behind nothing else anywhere on Earth. One of those explanations asks you to accept something ordinary. The other asks you to accept something that has never once been found anywhere, by anyone. In over 2 centuries of digging, 7 claims, 7 points to reality. Not because the pyramids aren't astonishing, They genuinely are. But because every single time, Grok took something real and stretched it into something false. So that's what actually happened when Grok was asked who built the pyramids. It didn't uncover a lost world. It did the exact thing these systems do when they're reaching to sound profound. It took real facts, a level floor, a star-aimed base, a clever slope, and quietly slid each one from amazing to impossible. 7 times. The same move. Every single time. Dressed up in a new unit of measurement each pass. What's actually worth keeping from all of this is this. When an AI tells you something that gives you chills, it isn't lying to you on purpose. It's pattern matching toward the most dramatic story that fits. And confidence costs it nothing at all to produce. It'll hand you a lost civilization in the exact same calm voice it uses to tell you the weather. Worth being fair here too. Since this pattern isn't unique to one company's model, every major labs assistant does some version of this when a question invites a dramatic answer over a boring true one. Because sounding certain is cheap and being right takes more work to verify. The specific claims in this video came from Grok. The underlying failure mode, reaching for the more exciting story instead of the correct one, shows up across the entire industry whenever nobody double-checks the output. Run the same 7-claim test on a different topic entirely. Ancient sites, medical symptoms, historical conspiracies, and the pattern repeats almost exactly. A confident model takes a real, checkable fact, swaps one word to make it sound impossible, and lets you fill in the rest with whatever story feels most satisfying. The fix isn't avoiding these tools. It's treating every dramatic claim the way this video treated Grok's 7. Find the real number underneath it. Then check whether the leap from that number to the conclusion actually holds, or whether it's the same trick wearing a new costume. The pyramids never actually needed a mystery. Real people built them, paid, fed, named, and buried in honor beside the kings they served for decades of their working lives. That's the true story. And somehow it's the one nobody ever makes a thumbnail out of. That's worth sitting with for a second. Because it says something about all of us. Not just about Grok. A workforce of skill, paid Egyptians solving a hard engineering problem with rope, water, and patience is a genuinely remarkable story. It's just not a mysterious one. And mysterious is what gets clicked. The AI didn't invent that bias toward drama. It learned it from millions of pages written by people who'd already made the same trade, reaching for the version of history that gives you chills over the version that's simply, thoroughly true. So here's the real question. Not who built the pyramids, because we already know that answer cold. It's this. When did an AI last tell you something amazing with total confidence? And did you actually stop to check it? Tell me the one that fooled you. I read every comment.